The chamber smelled of metal polish and power. A sterile cathedral of ego and arrogance, bathed in cold blue light, suspended above a neutral moon. Across the polished obsidian table, 32 alien delegates blinked, clicked, or glowed with practiced indifference as General Clarabelle North stepped into the hall. Her boots barely made a sound, but her presence did. She carried no weapon, only a small leather satchel, and the sort of calm usually reserved for surgeons or executioners. A few of the alien generals leaned back in their gravity cushions, their expressions ranging from bored to amused. The representative of the Glarn Confederacy, a 12-eyed plant with a nervous stammer, muttered to its neighbor in buzz clicks. Clarabelle ignored it, the way one ignores a fly while setting down a feast. She placed the satchel gently on the table and withdrew a silver thermos, a ceramic mug, and, unapologetically, 2 slices of banana bread wrapped in wax paper. "Apologies for the delay," she said, voice soft, clipped precise. "There was a sunrise over Olympus Mons that I wasn't willing to miss." Silence rippled through the room like static. On the far end, seated with the grace of a sledgehammer, was General V.R. O'Call of the Shivari Dominion. He was tall, scar-scaled, with ceremonial bone armor wrapped around his hulking form. His tongue flicked in amusement. "You come bearing cake and sentiment," he growled. His voice graveled dragged through venom. "Are these Earth's weapons now?" Clarabelle poured her coffee, ignoring the condescension with the expertise of someone who'd seen it before on 20 different planets. "No," she said cheerfully. "Our weapons are quite different. These are tokens of good faith." "Faith," V.R. O'Call sneered, "is what we had before your species infected the Galactic Compact with your ideas." Clarabelle took a slow sip, letting the heat sink into her bones. She wore her uniform with crisp exactness, no decoration except a single-stitched line on her sleeve. A mourning mark. The only person who knew who it was was her, and that was enough. "We're not here to rehash history," she said, "only to write tomorrow's terms." The words hung in the air, quietly authoritative. A representative from the Writhen Hive clicked something sarcastic in their native tongue. A translation chimed into the room. "Earth has a mouth bigger than its moon. Let them taste war if they wish it." Clarabelle glanced up. "I don't recommend that dish. We're terrible cooks, but good at barbecues." Some of the aliens laughed uneasily. Some stared. One narrowed his eyes. V.R. O'Call rose slowly from his chair. His presence shifted the gravity of the room. "You misunderstand, female. This is not a negotiation. This is spectacle. You will return to your soft world and tell them their words mean nothing." "I don't believe Earth sent me here to be decorative," she said, wiping a crumb from her sleeve. "Then allow me to make you ornamental," he snarled. Before anyone could move, V.R. O'Call stepped forward, raised his heavy, clawed foot, and kicked Clarabelle squarely in the chest. She flew backward with a brutal grace, striking the wall with a dull thud and sliding to the floor. The mug shattered beside her, dark coffee bleeding across the tiles like ink and water. There was a sharp intake of breath across the room. Clarabelle did not groan. She did not cry out. She blinked, slowly, measuredly, then sat up. Her jaw was clenched, one eye bruising already. She brushed back her hair, blood trickling from her lip. Then she smiled. Not the friendly kind. Not the diplomatic kind. A smile like the hum before a warhead drops. She stood with the posture of a dancer and a soldier, spine straight, boot steady. When she spoke, her voice was soft as a lullaby. "You've made your statement, General. I advise you write it down. It may be hard to speak later." V.R. O'Call chuckled and returned to his seat. "A human threat? Is this your tactic? Smile, bake, then die quietly." She dusted her uniform and looked around the table. Most of the delegates now watched her not with disdain, but calculation. A few shifted in their seats, as if some ancient instinct remembered what came after silence. Clarabelle picked up the broken mug piece, studied the jagged edge, and then dropped it into her satchel. "I'll have your answer by nightfall," she said. "But I'll say this once. Earth is not angry. Earth is disappointed. And we're dangerous when we're disappointed." She turned, limping slightly, and walked toward the exit. The doors hissed open. Outside, her second-in-command, a soft-spoken woman named Ward with a mind like a bear trap, stood waiting, expression unreadable. Ward held out a hand. Clarabelle leaned on it, just slightly, just enough. "Did they take the bait?" Ward asked. Clarabelle gave a tiny nod. "Then we moved to phase 2? Clarabelle smiled again. This one was colder. "No. Phase 3. Ward blinked. "We're skipping 2? "They kicked Earth's envoy, Ward. "That is phase 2. A moment passed. Then Clarabelle opened her comms and spoke clearly. "This is General Clarabelle North. Prepare Twilight option. Secure channels only. Condition Crimson." On the far side of the corridor, a few alien dignitaries watched her limp away. One turned to another and said something hushed in their tongue. The translator caught only part of it. "They bleed, but they do not break." And deep inside, the UHS kind reminder, beneath the polished decor and soft lighting, hundreds of quiet systems began humming to life. In hidden decks, Earth's soldiers sharpened old blades, calibrated drones, and whispered old songs. Not battle cries, lullabies. And Clarabelle, bruised and calm, sat in her private quarters and poured herself a fresh cup of coffee. She stirred it with one finger, watching the swirl, then whispered to herself, "You shouldn't have kicked me, darling." A flick of her wrist opened a screen showing orbital positions. The Shivari fleet was still broadcasting their victory. 1,000 ships. Clarabelle smiled, soft and sad. "You're about to learn," she said, "that Earth doesn't retaliate. We remember, and then we rewrite." Her eyes lingered on the blinking red dot labeled VROCAL's flagship. The coffee steamed quietly, and the countdown began. Clarabelle North did not pace. Pacing implied uncertainty, and she had already lived too many lives in war zones and waiting rooms to entertain that luxury. Instead, she stood at the observation window of the UHS kind reminder, cradling her coffee like it was a prayer, watching the stars blink behind the drifting wreckage of old treaties. The diplomatic kick had gone viral. Every channel on the galactic net played it on loop. General VROCAL's slow, brutal strike, Clarabelle's fall, her measured rise. Some alien news anchors cackled at it. Others labeled it a ritualistic insult, grossly misunderstood by humans. A few tried to analyze her expression afterward, pausing on the smile, magnifying the bruise. None of them got it right. Ward entered the chamber, holding a datapad. Her dark eyes scanned the room before approaching with the careful gravity of someone who knew what pressure could do to people and ships. "They've released a celebratory statement," Ward said without preamble. "The Shivari broadcast claims the human delegation has been thoroughly humbled." Clarabelle sipped. "They've also declared ownership over 2 border moons near the Eden Fringe." "Ballsy," she murmured, eyes still on the void. "They're already splitting my bones for spoils." Ward hesitated. "The Council wants to know if we're responding through official channels." Clarabelle turned. Her smile was the kind that looked gentle but held teeth behind it. "Tell them Earth is composing a sympathy bouquet. Something floral. With bite." Ward nodded and tapped her pad. "Twilight option is ready." Clarabelle leaned against the steel rail, mug warming her palm. "Did you grow up on Earth, Ward?" "Arcadia Station." "Close enough." Clarabelle nodded thoughtfully. "Did your mother ever teach you how to bait a wasp?" Ward's brow twitched. "No. You don't swat it. You let it land. Let it taste the sugar. Let it believe it's winning." She set down her mug. "Then you closed the jar." Ward said nothing. She didn't have to. Down below, in the underdecks of the kind reminder, hundreds of operatives stirred into action. They were not soldiers in the classical sense. There were no drums, no stomping boots. Only silent packs, cold tools, flickers of code whispered into the skin of systems. The kind of war Earth had perfected not by brawn, but by waiting. Clarabelle moved to the central command dais. The room darkened, then lit with holographic overlays. Shivari fleets in crimson, human ships in green, neutral zones in pale yellow. Her fingers moved swiftly across the interface, dragging 3 dots into an orbit she'd memorized during a lunar lockdown 7 years ago. Ward watched. You're baiting the whole fleet. Clarabelle's tone was mild. We're not here to bruise egos. We're here to make a point no one forgets. On screen, her image, still bruised, still elegant, was overlaid with a translation subtitle as Shivari news cycles looped her fall. Human weakness on full display, they said. Clarabelle smiled. Let's give them something else to display. Elsewhere in the galaxy, strange things began to happen. Quiet things. A Shivari data vault on Vexos 9 mysteriously collapsed from internal pressure. Their weapons lab on Retta Prime short-circuited mid-test and sent half their engineers into sickbay. Their memories scrambled into nonsense. A surveillance drone near the Eden Fringe began broadcasting audio of Clarabelle reading bedtime stories in 27 alien dialects. Each event looked like a glitch. Together, they were a sonnet. Back in the strategy room, Clarabelle opened a small drawer beneath the holomap table and retrieved a wax-sealed envelope. You're sending them a paper letter, Ward said, not hiding the dry disbelief. Clarabelle held it up. They'll spend days trying to decode it before they realize it's just polite and poisonous. She placed the envelope in a courier drone's compartment, then tapped the launch code. The drone zipped off with a cheery chirp. Handwritten, cherry ink. Cursive. Clarabelle added with satisfaction. Ward looked at her commander, woman to woman. You're calm. I'm focused. You're scaring the diplomats on Deck 5. They should be scared. Clarabelle turned to a console and typed in a 5-digit code. Instantly, dozens of Earthside black sites came online. Satellites reoriented. Deep-sea arrays blinked back encrypted pings. A sleeper ship near the Shivari homeworld adjusted its drift. VRO call sees the past as a pattern, she said aloud, not for Ward but for the moment. Humiliate, dominate, expand. But Earth? We see the long game. We grew up learning chess. They're still playing stickball. Ward didn't interrupt. She knew what came next was strategy disguised as memory. My grandmother once told me, Clarabelle murmured, the best revenge is the one that teaches. Otherwise, it's just noise. Just then, a signal came in. Open channel. Shivari broadcast. Clarabelle glanced at the readout. Ward stiffened. It's the execution footage. Clarabelle's face didn't change. The screen lit up with cold light. 3 human diplomats, bound and kneeling, blindfolded. VRO call's voice dripped through the speakers, translated but still foul. Let this be a lesson to those who send cakes to a war. Clarabelle watched silently as one after another they were struck down, not cleanly, but performatively. It was meant to provoke, to entertain, to mock. The screen cut to static. Clarabelle looked away only once, to the mug sitting cold on the sill. I knew them, she said softly. All 3. Ward said nothing. Contact Ghost Cells Theta and Pi. I want contingency routes Alpha through Delta Live within the hour. Tell Lumen Team they can light the fuse. No witnesses left breathing. Ward's breath caught. That's not a recall protocol. Clarabelle looked at her directly for the first time in an hour. They kicked a general, then killed her diplomats. The gloves are off. Outside the command deck, the lights dimmed slightly as internal systems shifted from passive surveillance to active response. Bring me Commander Salas, Clarabelle said. We need a man who can destroy a system without ever raising his voice. Ward hesitated, then walked off at a near run. Left alone, Clarabelle reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, delicate photograph. A girl 10 years old, wearing aviator goggles too big for her head. She studied it for several seconds, then folded it neatly and returned it to her breast pocket. Her reflection in the black glass stared back, eyes tired, mouth set like steel. She pressed her palm to the glass. You made a mistake, VRO call. You thought Earth would bleed and kneel and forget. She opened a comms link and typed in a restricted code. Hydra Protocol. Activate all sleeper divisions within 5 systems of Shivari core fleet. The ship shuddered almost imperceptibly as hundreds of hidden units blinked into awareness. The next image on the holomap showed the Shivari army moving to intercept Earth's diplomatic outpost in orbit of Calliope 4. Clarabelle watched them drift toward it like predators circling a candle, not knowing it was the fuse to a star. She didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled up a new screen, a data visualization of emotional sentiment across galactic species. The Shivari line rose in hubris. The human line ran quiet. A message blinked into her view, routed through 7 satellites and 1 stolen alien relay. "Are you certain?" She answered only, "Now." The galaxy would not hear a gunshot. Not yet. What they would hear was the quiet click of a human general's teacup settling on its saucer as systems across the void began to hum in harmony. The war hadn't started. It had been scheduled. And VROCall had just sent out the invitations. The Shivari fleet shimmered in orbit above Calliope for like a jeweled snare. 67 dreadnoughts, 2,000 lesser war cruisers, each bristling with weapons and arrogance. Their formation was beautiful, in a way only predators could be, coiled and patient, casting shadows across the planet below. On a nearby diplomatic relay station, small civilian craft scurried away like minnows sensing the presence of something vast and hungry. At the center of it all, General VROCall stood upon his flagship, the Fong of Dominion, with hands behind his back and venom in his smile. He watched the blue-green world turn slowly beneath him. "Soon," he murmured to his second. "We erased their voice. Their mistake was believing the galaxy would mourn them." Below, orbiting lower and far quieter, the kind reminder floated unnoticed. It had gone dark, every visible signature reduced to near extinction, as if morning had wrapped the ship in a shroud. But inside, it pulsed with life. Clarabelle North didn't sit. She stood in the center of command, backlit by starfield and silence, her posture relaxed, and her hands folded neatly at her waist. Every system on her ship had moved from passive to predator. "Commander Salas," she said gently, "begin." Salas, a lean man with silver at his temples, and the gaze of someone who'd broken moons without blinking, pressed one key. Not a fist. Not a dramatic gesture. Just a single touch. From 6 separate moons around Calliope 4, pulses of electromagnetic distortion danced outward. The Shivari's communications folded in on themselves. Their targeting systems blinked. Drones stopped responding. Inside their ships, lights flickered as AI assistants began reciting Earth nursery rhymes, soft, melodic, and wrong. The Fong of Dominion's main deck erupted into chaos. Officers barked commands in 3 languages. Screens twisted into static. One engineer screamed as her neural uplink overloaded. On board the kind reminder, Clarabelle sipped from her mug. "They'll assume it's sabotage," Salas said. "They always do," Clarabelle replied. "They never think it's design." Across the fleet, oxygen levels recalibrated themselves. Not dangerously, but just enough to unsettle. Enough to make every soldier feel like they were breathing someone else's fear. Then came the whispers. Earth's ghost teams, long invisible, now walked openly on Shivari decks. Clad in obsidian armor woven with light, their rifle silent, their method surgical. Whole engineering bays were evacuated without a sound. Commanders were found zip-tied to their own war tables, mouths gagged with handwritten apology notes in Earth cursive. The first official transmission from the Shivari side came 31 seconds later. It was short, shouted, panicked. "We are under human occupation." The message cut off. Clarabelle watched without blinking. "How many casualties?" "None so far," Ward said from her station. "Ghost Team Theta reports 82 captures, 0 kills. They're still offering surrenders." "They'll get one chance," Clarabelle said. "Then we start closing hands." VROCall slammed his clawed fist into the command dais, cracking it. "Where is the human?" A flicker on his personal screen answered. Clarabelle live feed. Calm, composed, with one eye still purple from the bruise he'd given her. She stood before a small whiteboard on which she'd drawn a smiley face. "Hello, darling," she said sweetly. The room around VROCall fell silent. "I imagine things feel unpredictable," she continued. "Your data's lying. Your ships are humming lullabies. Some of your men have vanished. I wouldn't be surprised if your socks start rearranging themselves. She leaned forward slightly. But you made two mistakes, VROCall. First, you thought Earth was civil, because we lacked claws. Second, you mistook our silence for weakness. When really, she held up her mug, we were just finishing our drink. He bared his fangs, roaring, "You dare mock the Dominion?" "I dare everything," she whispered. At that precise moment, 22 Shivari war cruisers exploded in synchronized blossoms of light, not from fire, but from within. Their own cores twisted by AI subversion. The debris fell like burning petals, scattering across the orbit of Calliope 4. The bridge of the kind reminder didn't cheer. It remained quiet, reverent. "Release the broadcast," Clarabelle said. Ward tapped the screen. Across the galaxy, in 100 different languages, Earth's message played. Images of the 3 executed diplomats, their names read aloud, followed by footage of Clarabelle walking unarmed into the Shivari Council. The kick, the smile, the aftermath. Then a single phrase, voiced gentle but chilling. "We do not strike first, but we write the last page." On the Fong of Dominion, lights failed. Backup systems kicked in, only to flicker again. VROCall's crew had stopped shouting. Some looked to him. Some stared at their hands, trembling. One of his lieutenants whispered. They said Earth had no bite. VROCall turned, furious. "They are cowards. This is sabotage. Sorcery." But even he saw it then. Not chaos. Orchestration. Every move. Every silence. Every smile. Clarabelle stood before a window, watching streaks of light shoot from their ship to the remains of the fleet. In the glass, she saw her own reflection, and something just behind it, history, perhaps waiting to applaud. "You know why Earth smiles?" she asked softly. Salas looked up. "Why?" "Because we don't need anyone to believe in us. We just need them to forget." Outside, the last of the Shivari dreadnoughts turned to flee. It didn't get far. A series of gravitational charges, disguised as mining relays, activated. The ship was swallowed by its own panic, then by fire. Clarabelle turned back to her crew. "All systems, report. Minimal resistance remaining," Ward said. "Some life pods are evacuating. Majority of the fleet is either disabled or surrendered. Total casualties, human, 0. Shivari, undetermined but substantial." Clarabelle nodded. "Secure the pods. Treat injuries. Be humane. Even after the executions? Especially after. Let the galaxy see how we end things." Salas studied her carefully. "Do we send terms to the Dominion?" Clarabelle didn't answer immediately. She watched a screen that showed VROCall slumped in his command chair, his expression not angry, but stunned. As if he'd seen something ancient. Something true. "Not yet," she said at last. "Let them sit with the silence." She walked from the deck. The crew parted for her without command. Some saluted. Others just stared at the woman who'd orchestrated one of the most perfect reversals in military history. Back in her quarters, Clarabelle sat beside her mug, now cooled. She didn't reheat it. Instead, she pulled up a private transmission window. One recipient. A child's voice answered, "Hi, Mama." Clarabelle smiled. Her voice cracked a little. "Hey, sweetheart. Are you done being brave yet?" She exhaled softly. "Almost." Behind her, an alert chimed once, then went silent. The kind reminder had just received an encrypted message from Earth High Command. One line. Authorization confirmed. Begin phase final. Clarabelle turned slowly toward the screen. Her smile faded, and something colder rose in her eyes. The battlefield no longer burned. It simply hovered, suspended above the broken orbit of Calliope 4, a graveyard of ambition and scorched steel. Dozens of Shivari ships, some split in half, some curled like fists unclenching, drifted in slow, endless spirals, their hulls open to the void. And in the center of it all, untouched and composed, the kind reminder sailed in silence. Inside, the air was still. No celebration, no noise, just quiet footsteps and the hum of recovery. Clarabelle North stood in the observation chapel, a hollow dome of glass and starlight where no words were required. The holographic interface around her cycled through casualty reports, prisoner counts, fleet analytics. She ignored them all. Her gaze was fixed on a small floating urn. Not real, of course. Just a visual, a ritual construct for each of the 3 diplomats executed on broadcast by the Dominion. Earth's new martyrs. Ward entered quietly, offering a respectful pause before stepping into the circle. Her uniform was pristine, but her eyes carried the weight of a woman who had watched both victory and loss twist in the same breath. "They're sending a delegation," Ward said. "Coalition of the 9 species. They want clarification." Clarabelle didn't move. "Do they?" "They're frightened." "They should be." Ward hesitated. "Should I prepare a statement?" Clarabelle turned, and her voice was soft, almost maternal. "I already have." With a gesture, she pulled up a holographic message. A single sentence in 31 dialects. "Earth accepts your silence as apology." No terms. No negotiation. Just an acknowledgement that the void had spoken louder than words. Ward gave a quiet breath. "We have wounded Shivari survivors. Mostly junior officers. A few civilians. They're asking for mercy." Clarabelle's expression didn't change. "They'll receive it. You're sure?" "I'm not interested in vengeance, Ward. I'm interested in instruction." Across the command deck, teams worked to coordinate rescue and salvage. The Shivari fleet was gone, not obliterated, not scattered, but surgically disassembled. Engines disabled. Systems rewritten. Lives spared deliberately. It wasn't a slaughter. It was a lesson. Clarabelle stepped forward. "Send humanitarian kits. Food, medical assistance. And when the aid arrives, I want it delivered by children." Ward blinked. Children. Earth cadets. Young. In uniform. Let the Dominion see who spared them. Let them understand who we raise. Ward nodded slowly, a chill crawling beneath her skin. Understood. In the silence that followed, Clarabelle tapped a code into her console. A new message flashed across the interface. Target. Fong of Dominion. Status. Captured. Commander on board. Awaiting judgment. VRO call was alive. That was not an accident. He sat in the brig now, wrists bound in soft magnetic cuffs, watching a loop of his own speech where he declared Earth fragile, foolish, soft-bellied. Every few minutes, the footage would skip, just enough to replay the moment he kicked Clarabelle, just enough to show his smile. Clarabelle requested a private chamber. When she entered, he did not rise. His pride had bent, but not broken. So, he rasped, his voice raw. "This is how Earth ends wars now. With polite assassins and poisoned lullabies." She stood behind the glass, hands clasped. "This is how Earth teaches wars to end." VRO call narrowed his eyes. "Do you mean to kill me now? Quietly? In a cell?" Clarabelle tilted her head. "Oh no. You'll live. That's the punishment." He flinched. "You'll watch the galaxy shift around you," she said. "You'll attend peace summits where your name is listed with shame. You'll hear children sing songs about the day Earth smiled and your fleet died." He bared his fangs. "You have no gods, human. No code. Only knives and coffee." She smiled gently. "And yet it's always the coffee you remember." She left him with that. Back on the command deck, Ward was waiting. "Transmission from Earth High Command. They've ratified your declaration. You're being recalled." Clarabelle paused. "They expect me to return? They expect you to parade." Clarabelle sighed. "Earth doesn't need parades. It needs memory." She walked to the main viewport. The field of floating debris looked peaceful now, like autumn leaves suspended in a frozen stream. Behind her, Salas approached. "The coalition wants to meet. They're calling you the Whisper General." "I prefer Clarabelle. They also want to know what happens if someone else tries to strike you next." Clarabelle took a long breath. "We'll smile again. That's all." Salas nodded. "And the funeral?" Clarabelle turned to him, held in silence. "Like the good ones are." He hesitated. "For the diplomats?" She looked past him, eyes distant. "For who I was before they kicked me." A beat of silence. Then a message lit across the screen. Shivari High Command. Unconditional surrender. Request Earth terms. Clarabelle stared at the text. Her hand hovered over the console. No, she said. Ward and Salas looked up. No terms, she repeated. No treaty. Let them live with what they saw. Salas leaned forward. So this is it? No, Clarabelle whispered. This is the warning. She sent the reply herself. Just one line. Earth doesn't hold grudges. We plan legacies. The galaxy would remember what happened above Calliope 4. Not because of the fire, not because of the losses, but because of the restraint. Because Earth could have ended a species, and chose instead to educate it. The funeral didn't need drums or eulogies, just silence, and stars, and the slow turning of every surviving eye in the galaxy toward Earth. Clarabelle turned away from the viewport at last. Her coat brushed the floor. Her boots echoed softly. In the brig, VRO call sat alone, the playback loop blinking again. Kick. Smile. The beginning of the end. And far across the stars, in hundreds of languages and thousands of whispers, the question began to spread. What happens when Earth stops smiling? And no one, not even the victors, dared to answer.